Sunshine Week. Happy Friday. It's the end of Sunshine Week, and this is kind of a special show where I wanted to talk for just a couple minutes about government transparency and why it's so important and where it comes from and why transparency is for government, but privacy is for people. People get this mixed up all the time. You hear people saying, well, transparency means that I want to take government and I want to use government's hammer to go whap private people and force them to tell me information that I want to know. They have to be transparent. I'm going to use government to make them do it. That's not right. I want to explain why, and I want to start off at the beginning. But first of all, let me say something about Sunshine Week. This is something that happens every year about this time in March, and it's a great, thanks to the people who put this on and kind of create the opportunity to put a little extra emphasis on government transparency. So thanks to the Sunshine Week folks, and you can go to ocpathink.org and actually read a blog post I wrote that kind of is the written version of what I'm talking about today. I wrote this for Sunshine Week. Let's start at the beginning. We always want to start with principles. Why do we believe in government transparency? A lot of governments don't believe in transparency, and even a lot of people, if you push them on it, if they like what government is doing behind the scenes, they don't really care, and they think transparency is just about, sort of efficiency, making sure that, we know the bad things that are going on, and they don't care about the rest of it, and it's just sort of a pragmatic idea that, well, sometimes, in some ways, government should be transparent. That's not right at all, right? And frankly, there are a lot of things that government could do more efficiently if we had no transparency, right? We could still have a democratic system. We could vote for people, and then they could just go and do whatever they want, and we could vote for them periodically, and it would still be democracy. At least nominally, it would be democracy with no transparency, but that's not right. And let's start at the beginning with the Declaration of Independence, right? The Declaration of Independence sets forth one argument for government. Now, it's not the only argument for government, but it is one argument for government. And of course, the operative part is the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Government belongs to us. Now, that is one view. Not everybody holds that view, and I always try to drive things down to, where do we diverge? Where do we disagree? Why do we really disagree? I hate having disagreements with people where we just talk past each other, right? Let's climb down the tree and figure out where these branches diverge, and I think it's right here, at least when it comes to government transparency and a lot of other things too, right? This is one way to view government, because it's one way to view rights. Where do you get your rights? Where do I get my rights? There's another view. There's another view that says there's no such thing as human rights. Nobody has rights. Rights are something that we make up. Right now, almost nobody stops there, right? And so this leads us to our second view. So the first view, if you're a philosophy major or junkie or whatever, you might call that nihilism, right? The first view is there's nothing, we might slap the label rights on things, but there are no fundamental rights that anybody has. The second view is that rights come from government. And this is a really popular view, and some people say, well, they start with the first view, but then they say, well, I don't really like that very much. So people do have rights, and those rights are created by power, the power of government. And this is important. Franklin Delano Roosevelt held this view. You can see it in his Commonwealth Club address, famous Commonwealth Club address that FDR gave. I think it was in his first term in office, before the Second World War and any of that. He made the argument that government gives people rights. Rights come from government. And he said, in his Commonwealth Club address, he said, so therefore, and this makes a lot of sense if you start from this flawed premise, therefore, if you give government more power, government can give you more rights. If you want more rights, all you have to do is give more power to the politicians. If you start there, that makes a lot of sense, right? So we got one view, no rights. The second view is people have rights, but they just come from government. They're created by government. The third view, the Declaration of Independence view, my view, is that we have rights to start with by virtue of being human beings. You can call it natural law. You can call it divine law. You can call it a divine imprint or a divine spark or whatever you want to call it. You can call it human rights or natural rights or whatever. People have rights, inalienable rights, as Thomas Jefferson wrote. But rights start first, and this is what's really perverse about what FDR said. He actually claimed that the Declaration of Independence said that we create government so that government can give us rights. That's not at all what this says. This says we have rights, therefore we can create government, and therefore when we do create government, it has to protect our rights. Right? Because our rights come first. Our rights come first literally in a chronological sense. We have rights even if there's no government. That's why we have the right to self-defense, right? Even if you are lost on a desert island, if somebody comes along, they want to take your life, you have a right to defend yourself, even up to using deadly force, because you have that right, right? You could be lost on a desert island with a bunch of people, and all of you would have a certain sense of what is right and wrong based on the fact that all of us pretty much actually, at least when it comes to us, believe in something like the third view, the Declaration of Independence view. So what does that tell us about government? We create government, our rights come first, government belongs to us, and therefore, right, this is where the idea of democracy comes from. Democracy is not an end in itself. That always bothers me when people say, well, this was democratic, that was democratic. Somebody earlier today on social media told me, well, this area thing over there, this is democratic, it's democracy. I said, well, look, people voted on it, yes, but that doesn't tell us whether it's good public policy or bad public policy. Morality is not defined by democracy. Democracy is a good idea to run government because we believe in the consent of the government. We believe government belongs to us, but democracy, true democracy, based on that principle, requires transparency, right? Consent of the governed means, as I said in my blog post earlier this week, consent of the governed means informed consent, right? There's no real consent without informed consent. When we go to the polls, if we have no information, if we don't know what our politicians actually do behind the scenes, then it's fake democracy, it's fraudulent democracy, right? Transparency is essential to democracy, or if you like, to having a republic, right? Transparency is essential to that. What about this idea? People say, well, I like transparency, you like transparency, so let's use government to force everybody else to be transparent. That's wrong if we believe in the Declaration of Independence principles, which tell us that people's rights come first. Government is to protect people's rights. Just like that informs us about the essential nature of transparency in government, it also means that government has no power to go out and violate people's rights, even in the name of something wonderful like transparency, even in the name of something like democracy. We see this all the time. People say, well, if people do it democratically, then they can take this away from that person or do this to that person because it's democratic, right? I mean, we see this even in thug tyrannies where they'll hold these elections and then claim, well, we had an election and Putin won with 80% of the vote, so now everything Putin does is democratic, and therefore it must be moral. You don't believe that, I don't believe that. Nobody really believes that. Everybody understands that that is a bogus argument, even though we get it regurgitated at us from time to time by people who benefit from it, right? Transparency is for government. Privacy is for people. We have rights as private individuals to be transparent if we want to be, and to be private if we want to be. And you know the best people at this, the best people I think, the exemplars of how this worked, were actually the American founders, the guys who wrote the Declaration and the Constitution and debated it. You know, so much of what they wrote, and of the major works debating independence, debating the Constitution, almost all of the major works were written anonymously, because anonymity is really important if you're serious enough that you want people to have to confront your arguments rather than to simply turn around and make ad hominem attacks or dismiss your arguments because, well, that's John Adams, and John Adams, you know, I find him to be obnoxious, or that's Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson, you know, he's a Francophile atheist, right? It washed away all of that, a lot of that, not all of it, but it eliminated a lot of the opportunities for ad hominem attacks, cheap, fallacious reasoning, and forced people to actually confront arguments made in the Federalist Papers, in the Anti-Federalist essays, by the different writers debating these things, right? And it forced the argument to the merits, right? Privacy, even in politics, the American founders would say, is a good thing. And I know sometimes people come to me and they say, yeah, but I think George Soros is behind this and I want to know. Or I think the Humane Society of the USA is behind this. Or, you know, maybe you're on the other side. It's the Koch brothers or ALEC or whatever, right? And the answer the American founders would give you, the answer that I give anybody who brings that up, sometimes I put it more nice than this, but I'm not going to today, is stop being so lazy, right? Just because George Soros says something doesn't prove that he's wrong. I don't like George Soros, and I don't like any of his principles and most of his ideas. But sometimes he's right. Most of the time he's wrong, right? The Koch brothers, sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't. But the fact that it's them, the fact that it's Charles Koch or George Soros or the NRA or the Humane Society of the USA or anybody else does not, I mean, arguing that something is wrong based on who is presenting it is lazy. And ultimately, it rests on a logical fallacy, right? To be real citizens who really engage in civic debate and really reason together about the issues, and frankly, that whole idea is essential to the idea of a self-governing republic, right? Where we come together to govern ourselves, right? If we want to do that, we need to strive for the kind of public discourse that isn't looking to score cheap shots because, well, that guy's a jerk and that guy's rich and that guy's whatever, right? But that actually confronts the arguments on the merits. That is what we try to do on the Trent England Show. Sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we get it right. I love to hear from you. Thanks for watching this special Friday Sunshine Week part of the episode of the Trent England Show. Remember, you can subscribe on iTunes, you can subscribe on YouTube, you can find us on SoundCloud, we're on Facebook. You can find us all over the place. You can comment, share your thoughts, suggest interviews or topics for future shows. I love to hear from you. And if you respond to this show while supplies allow, in the first day or so after it gets posted, if you need a copy of a pocket constitution, I've got a whole bunch of these, courtesy of my good friends and former colleagues at the Heritage Foundation. If you want a pocket constitution, I will send one out to you if you send us a message on the OCPA Facebook page. So you got to like OCPA on Facebook and send us a message. You have to include your mailing address. We're not going to spam you or anything. We'll send you a free pocket constitution or 2 or 3 or whatever you need because, hey, look, this stuff actually matters. There's no better guide to how to create and run a government than the ideas in the Declaration and the ideas that are the foundation of and represented in the Constitution. And so there you go. Thanks for watching this special edition of the Trent England Show. I'll see you on Monday.